Okay, look, it's speculation. You're not allowed to speculate. It's facts and logic. In fact, we've speculated and we found ourselves through speculation to be absolutely innocent of anything, any wrongdoing. It's just crazy. It's just conspiracy theories. If we speculate, speculation to speculate about speculations, point 3.4 in the Talmud. Okay, speculations are completely bogus, and if you follow speculations, then you're probably conspiracy theorists like Alex Jones or whatever. But we've investigated ourselves and we found ourselves to be completely free, just like investigations of the Big Nine event, free of all facts and logic that would indicate any kind of decisive decision about exactly what types of things that we actually did wrong, which is nothing.
Yeah, I'd just like to give my opinion on all this, that I think it is a huge fail. And as I said in my video a couple days ago, the system is rigged and the system cannot be trusted, even though it's coming out that the system doesn't work. And in fact, it only benefits the 0.01%, the real oligarchical elite, not even the 1%. The 1% is who has businesses that employ people that make the economy work and that give you your income. The 0.001% is the top oligarchical elite that run things like the Federal Reserve. So we've seen then a massive fail on the side of the Trump administration to not do what they said they would do. But I think a lot of people expected this. This is kind of the nature of politics, is that it requires compromise. It requires some degree of going back on maybe even things that you said you would do. Every politician has failed to keep all of his campaign promises. This one is a little bit different, though, because it was such a big deal and it's such a insight into the way that the system has really worked and how it has used vices to entrap and control people. We covered the Donald Bower book on the history of sexpionage about a year ago, and that was an excellent kind of appendix or an addendum to the excellent book by Whitney Webb on One Nation Under Blackmail. I highly recommend this book. It's from my publisher as well. You can get my books, Esoteric Hollywood 1, 2, and 3, at the website, which covers a lot of this type of material from the vantage point of Hollywood. And in this book, she gets into the ties between the long-standing relationship of both the uniparty elements of the DNC and the GOP and this specific network of blackmail that goes back to the Cold War, when we look at people like Robert Maxwell, who had connections with both Western intelligence and the KGB. He met an untimely demise, and most likely that Ghislaine had been sort of raised in and taught this same type of methodical entrapment operation. I think that's pretty clearly what's going on, and I don't think anybody believes that he killed himself, nor do they believe the existing story that they've investigated themselves and come to the conclusion that the establishment did no wrong. This is obviously just preposterous, and it's a huge mistake, I think, to do this. But that's the way that the establishment treats the public, which is kind of the way that a pimp treats a hoe, so to speak. You are sort of smacked around and you're gaslit, and you just take it because that's who you are and that's who they are. But it's fitting too, because Jeff Stein McEffrey was a kind of a PIMP. I don't know if you heard about me. That's a song. But the networks and the connections and the power elite, the control structure has been completely kind of opened up so everybody can see how this legacy system works. And books like One Nation Under Blackmail, books like my books, are really, I think, crucial to readers and the reading educated public to understand how this works and why it's such a nasty, disastrous, and viperous system. And ultimately, it's about vices and mastering and controlling people through vices. Even psychological warfare, even situations like psyops or, mind war and psy war, even those domains also utilize the idea of demoralizing people through vices. And so you can utilize the vices as a kind of weapon of warfare, not just Hollywood or pop music or toxic culture, but other vices like entrapment. And so cults and networks, and if you remember the Donald Boer book, we went into fascinating aspects of history that most people don't know about, things like Kenji Doihara, who was a kind of Jeff Stein McEffrey maybe 100 years before he came on the scene, or even Maxwell. And he was a master, not just spy, but he basically set up a network of houses of ill repute throughout China. And he was able to not just get information from unlucky Johns that happened to sleep with his network of Japanese ladies of the evening, but he also utilized drug warfare, because he was able to addict many of the Chinese and Russian soldiers to opium, and also thus weaken the culture and the society for warfare. And when the Japanese came in, they took over many provinces because the Chinese in several of their provinces had become completely degenerate and demoralized. It wasn't just the British that utilized this idea of drug opium war. So the same idea happens with all power elites, is that the temptation is too strong to utilize these criminal networks, black operations, black market goods to entrap people, because it's just an easy method to control. And although maybe we don't know this, and it's new to a lot of people, they are learning about this, or they've known about it maybe somewhat, this is really, unfortunately, the norm in history. Governments have always used espionage and honey traps, or networks of ladies of the evening and guys of the evening as well. It goes both ways, especially during the Cold War. The KGB, for example, was very proficient at figuring out who might have Skittles tendencies, and thus entrapping high-profile individuals in corporations or in the military through those kinds of sexual entrapment operations. Stalin was very efficient at this through the NKVD, for example. But most intelligence agencies, or all, do similar types of things. So the idea that this was nothing but a nothing burger is absolutely preposterous. The track record of world history is populated with pimps and hoes, right? This is crazy to think that it's not the case. So not only is it disappointing on the part of the bravado and the claims of the Trump administration, but all the people that are coming out and pretending like this is a nothing burger are really showing their true colors as not actually legitimate journalists or researchers or whatever they're talking heads, whatever they're supposed to be. They're really just a bunch of paid propagandists. And that's what we critiqued about mainstream media for so long. But it turns out a lot of the so-called alternative mainstream media is also just parroting and repeating establishment talking points. So props to Tucker, props to AJ, props to others who are not going along with this and are actually being consistent in standing on their principles and not just playing party politics, or cult of personality, because this is going to be a huge disaster. It's already a huge disaster. I think it was a mistake, but it seems like certain foreign countries really have the say-so when it comes to particularly our foreign policy, don't they? And anything touching anything relating to that region is a no-go. So what does that tell you? Well, it tells you that espionage is very real. Espionage is a huge element to how our country is beholden to foreign interests. And it's not just people in the Middle East. There are other operatives and espionage works going on from China or other countries as well. It's not good, but it's very normal. And this is why every country has embassies. Embassies are full of spies. And most countries probably engage in some degree of entrapment. But I think the shocking thing is the gaslighting from the establishment to say that no, this doesn't even exist. And it's weird because everybody knows that it does exist now. So to keep doubling down and tripling down, that can actually be an effective strategy, but it only works when you have the controls of the levers of media and information. So the more that the system doubles down and triples down when people are waking up, it's really a dangerous game to play because, again, people are not going to buy this anymore. So there are some bright spots here. But that means that the system will probably strike back. I've been saying Empire Strikes Back very soon. I don't know what it's going to be. We talked about that a little bit today on Sean Atwood's show. But regardless, this is how the system really works. And books like this, books like Esoteric Hollywood 1, 2, and 3, you can get signed copies, by the way, at the website in the shop at jasonelsis.com. These go into the hidden networks of power, the hidden networks of control in finance, in corporations, Beberg, all of these things very closely tie together, politics. And it really illustrates as well the overlap between not just intelligence agencies and, say, entertainment with Diddy, but also with spy agencies and with cults, all of which have overlapped for centuries, even into the ancient world. And that's really what I've focused on for so many years here at this channel and at my website and my books, is the overlap and interplay between these entities. And what we're seeing is all of that being vindicated. This has all been proven to be true. So how does this help you? How does this help an individual? Well, first of all, we learn that we can always take what the establishment is putting out with a grain of salt. And I'm not wedded to any political entity or thing. I've always just said, if something good happens, it's good. If something bad happens, it's bad. You can call it out. It's a right-wrong paradigm, not a right-left paradigm. That's kind of the attitude I've had for a long time. Day-to-day politics, I think, is completely stupid. In fact, the news itself is a psyop. I see millions and millions of people who consume endless hours of news, and I'm like, what are you actually getting out of this? I don't understand the draw. Do you feel that you're an intellectual, that you're well-informed because you follow news headlines? And then they don't even have like a worldview or a context in which to place these stories as part of a bigger picture. So it's just an endless scrolling infinity vomit diarrhea feed of news. And it's like, what is that doing for you? Are you just imagining that you're an educated, intelligent person because of an infinite news feed? But news is itself a psyop because it's a replacement for actual education. It's what normies do to think they're educated, is follow news stories and headlines. And I'm not saying that there's not a place to see sort of updates as to what's going on, but I mean, people that read the news aren't reading books. That's my point here, right? Other good books, right? Like Management of Savagery, which we're going to be analyzing and breaking down. Not that we agree with everything in either of these books, but at least it's a better approach than spending your time and your hours throughout the day consuming endless infinity news, which is just psyops, basically. And the good thing about books is that even though sometimes books will cite the news, books at least give you context and depth and consistency in the big picture to some degree, right? Like this book, for example, would be a history of Maxwell and Jeff Stein McCaffrey for all of their operations, going back to even Adnan Khashoggi and the weapons dealing with him and how he worked with the establishment, going back to Jeffrey's time at Bear Stearns, being involved in shady sus dealings there, and then it branching out into, Zorro Ranch and all this crazy stuff, as well as all the connections to world elites. So, it's just preposterous that they would try this gaslighting scheme, but I guess that's really all they can do. But we are wisening up to this, and you can still opt out of this system as best you can. That's what I would say. Don't think that any of these legacy things are going to come to your aid, come to your defense, come to your salvation. They're not going to help you. They're not your friend. Even though they pretend to be your friend, they're not your friend. What you got to do is figure out how you as an individual can escape this system as best you can. And that could be different for different people. Maybe you decide to go to some other place. I'm not saying you need to do that. Most places are not actually as good as the US. Some are. Maybe they're better. I don't know. I've not spent a lot of time outside the US, so I can't speak to expatriating, although I've had many friends who have done it, and I've had many friends that have not done it. So, what you choose to do depends on your goals and your plans. But I think for people that want to have marriage, family, etc., it's probably best to get out of blue cities, get out of big cities. It's probably best to think about alternative means of currency, whether that's gold or bartering with something. Those things are possibilities. I never said you can't do those things. I think Bitcoin is the best option. I've been vindicated again, another all-time high in Bitcoin today. And that just shows you that another $5 trillion debt raising on the part of Trump is probably the best debt. $5 trillion, probably going to be a lot of debt, but probably the best debt. I don't know what you think. Probably. Do you like the debt? We're going to make debt great again. It's going to be the best debt. Not a good idea. Not a good idea to have another $5 trillion in debt, and people are going to start figuring out when it's too late that Bitcoin actually was a safe haven. Now, everybody's going to say, "Oh, but what about the power going out? Are you going to run your Bitcoin with a hamster wheel? Are you going to trade your Bitcoin at the saloon and when we go back to the 1800s?" We're not going back to the 1800s. We're not. They didn't erect all this infrastructure to get rid of the internet and go back to the 1800s. That just is absolutely stupid. It makes no sense. It's one of the dumbest arguments against Bitcoin that I still hear on a daily basis. So you know what? HFSP, baby. But the rest of us, people who do want to exit the system, get to the country, get to some kind of organic homestead type living. For a lot of people, that's what they want to do. Get out of these mega cities if you can. Try to figure out a way to be your own boss is another thing that people aren't figuring out or learning. That's what I decided to do about 11 years ago, and it was the best decision I ever made. Leaving academia, the legacy academia system, going into business for myself, doing my own media, being my own boss. That was the best decision I ever made. Probably in the next video, I'll talk about how I got out of the mindset of being some sort of wagey. Not that I'm talking down to you if you are that, but there does come a point, I think, where you just decide I'd rather risk not being a wagey and being successful as my own boss, or just sort of staying in sort of a comfortable, easy situation. Men are meant to be adventurous. Men are meant to take on challenges like that, go out and try those things. That's what men do. But nowadays, men are castrated and are emasculated and are weak. They don't have any kind of adventurous spirit. And that's actually what the technocratic system said they wanted to do, was to get rid of the adventurous spirit in man, especially in Western man. So be sure and like this video. Be sure and check out some of the books that I'm always talking about. Read them for yourselves. Instead of spending so much time scrolling through news, which is basically just worthless psyops, you really have to spend the time reading and chewing on the words and the message and letting it sink in. Taking notes, underlining. People ask, why do you destroy your books? First of all, it's a paperback. It's not going to really be worth anything anyway, probably. But the reason that I underline so profusely is because it's tactile and it's helping me see and interact with, and thus, like a sponge, soak up and remember the information. And so people ask, do you have some sort of elaborate system by which you took? No, there's no elaborate system. I literally just write on the page, on the note, what's the more important thing on that page. And yes, most of it ends up underlined, but that's for your own imbibing of the information. So I would recommend doing that. That's it. There's no secret codes or rainbow messages with the sticky notes. They just are sticky notes. But I found that to be the most useful for me. Maybe you want to do some different system, whatever. But if you would hit like, share, remember to de-soy yourself by becoming a toxic masculinity master, a 33rd degree esoteric toxic masculinity master when you initiate yourself into chalk.com at choq.com in the show description. Head on over to chalk.com, use promo code J40, that's JAY40 to get 40% off, or the promo code JAY44LIFE to get 44% off this recurring subscription. But you can unsubscribe at any time, so don't feel like you're locked in. Next video I'm going to do is going to be a little more personal. I'm going to talk about how I got out of the 9-to-5 situation and what broke me out of those mindsets that I had, and hopefully that will help you in some way. If you would hit like and share. And it's very unfortunate that we're in this situation, but it's also good because people are going to even less so trust the system, hopefully.